Many of you who have been worshiping with us through the summer, you know that Reverend John and I have been focusing our sermon themes based on 3 books by Brené Brown. So the month of June was the month of the age of imperfection, or the gifts of imperfection. And then the month of July, we were daring greatly. And now, Brené Brown's 3rd book, we are rising strong. So I thought a theme throughout Brené Brown's writings really are the idea of vulnerability and the fact that to truly live your life, oftentimes we do have to be vulnerable in one way or the other. And that's not something that any of us really look forward to do. She quotes from a speech that was given by Roosevelt in 1910 about the man in the arena, and the idea being that we really have to step into the arena. We have to wrestle or fight or defend ourselves. We have to sweat, we fall down, we're bloodied, we're bruised. But what she focuses on in her 3rd book here is the ability for us to get up again, even when we're knocked down. And I think that idea of rising strong speaks to a sense of resilience. And in her research, what she found out was that most often, a factor in people's ability to be resilient is some kind of a spiritual understanding in their life and a way of viewing their world. So I thought it certainly makes sense to me as a person of faith that the times when I have struggled and wrestled as Jacob, that often it is my faith that helps me to rise up and to feel strong once again. She describes this process of rising up again with 3 terms: the reckoning, the rumbling, and the revolution. And so last week we were reckoning together, and today, are you ready to rumble? Because that's what we're going to talk about. Now, when I thought about this theme, the character that jumped out for me in my mind was Jacob. And I have to say it's one reason why I was very happy to name my youngest son Jacob. Because the character of Jacob in the Bible as we know it is one of not perfection, not of always getting everything right. In fact, he stumbles, he really falls, he's conniving at times, he's industrious, he's passionate, he's talented, he's determined. And I thought those are qualities I don't think I would necessarily feel that that was a bad thing for a son of mine to have. So the name Jacob had meaning for me in naming my youngest after that character of faith. But you know, to get an understanding of Jacob from the Bible, not from my home, let's look at him for a moment at his full story. We got a snippet of it from the reading from Heather. But as I read through the broader story as recorded in Genesis, you realize it does kind of read like a movie script. I mean, this could be an adventure flick. You can imagine who might star as Jacob or his brother Esau, but it's kind of one of those epic stories that Joseph Campbell talks about, kind of like this monomyth, like this idea of this hero kind of being raised and going out and having this experience that he brings back to his hometown or village, and it changes things. And that is certainly true of Jacob. So imagine this is like a movie script summary. In the foreign land of Canaan lives Isaac, son of Abraham, with his clever, strong-willed wife Rebekah and his twin sons Esau and Jacob. And the firstborn Esau is a strong and fearless hunter with a voracious appetite for sensual pleasures. Jacob is a shepherd, more tender and compassionate than Esau. Just as Esau is the pride of his father, so is Jacob the apple of his mother's eye, Rebekah. And she is convinced that Jacob, though the second-born son, is the chosen one and the rightful heir of Isaac and Abraham. And she tells him that when she was with child, God announced to her, 2 nations are within my womb. 2 manner of men shall be delivered to you. The one shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger. Can you hear the orchestra music? Da, 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 da. One day, Esau returns from a hunt to find Jacob preparing a lentil porridge, Famished, he asks Jacob for some food, and Jacob agrees, but on one condition, that Esau sell him his birthright. Since Esau ascribes little value to its meaning, he readily agrees, and they conclude the pact. And time has passed, and Isaac has grown old and nearly blind, and it is time to pass on his paternal blessing to the firstborn. He asks Esau to hunt and prepare some game for him, after which he will give him his blessing. Rebekah knows she must act now, and so cornering Jacob, she pressures him into deceiving Isaac so that he obtains the blessing instead of Esau. Jacob resists, but when Rebekah vows to take the blame for the ploy, he finally consents. What son can't go along with what his mother wants? And so Jacob tricks his father. And when Esau returns from the hunt and appears before his father, he explodes in anger when he learns of the scheme. And having obtained only a lesser blessing from Isaac, he vows to kill Jacob as soon as his father passes away. Are you following? There's a lot of intrigue going on here. So Isaac, following Rebekah's suggestion, advises Jacob to flee to Haran to the home of Laban, Rebekah's brother, and to ask him to marry one of his daughters. So laden with gold, silver, skins, spices, and oils, Jacob sadly leaves his home and his loved ones. So he's rather reluctant to head out onto this voyage. Soon, however, he realizes that he is being followed. A Canaanite, one of Esau's brother-in-laws, robs him of the treasure that was to be his dowry. So one night, as he is asleep, Jacob has a vision of a stairway with angel-like figures in it. And during this vision, God promises him protection and prosperity. The next morning, Jacob swears to remain faithful and devoted to God. And after an arduous journey, Jacob arrives in Haran, and haggard and drained of his strength, he immediately forgets his fatigue when he sees a pretty young girl at the fountain. Now, do you remember I was talking about the well last week? And the Samaritan woman meeting Jesus there, and she says, "This is the well of Jacob." This is where all the happenings occur, is at the well. So this is where Jacob first sets eyes on a young girl. And the girl is Rachel, the youngest daughter of his uncle Laban. And Jacob falls head over heels in love with her. And though Laban greets his nephew heartily, he cannot conceal his disappointment that Jacob has arrived without any gifts. Remember that dowry that was stolen from him on the way? Laban's two sons, Morash and Beor, are less delighted by Jacob's arrival. They realize without a dowry, it just means that they're going to have to share their whatever assets they have with this other cousin that's arrived. So Jacob soon asks Laban to let him marry Rachel, and he even accepts Laban's rigorous conditions. Okay, are you listening to this, gentlemen? That Jacob must become his indentured servant for a full 7 years. Look at the lovely lady next to you. Would you have worked for 7 years for the honor of marrying her? Jacob proves to be a singularly successful herdsman, and he actually contributes mightily to the welfare of Laban's people. I think that's important to hear. He's not just this conniving guy that wants to get his way without having to work for it. He actually is a very hardworking and disciplined person. So thus, after 7 years, Laban is unwilling to let him leave and devises a cunning scheme, because since Jacob has been so prosperous, the idea is that he would leave and kind of go to his own part of the land, but Laban doesn't want to lose this really industrious son-in-law. So Laban does not want him to leave, so he comes up with a scheme. And when Jacob awakens on the morning following the consummation of his marriage with Rachel, he is shocked to discover that in fact he has been duped, and it is Rachel's older sister Leah that he has slept with. So Laban forced Leah to take her sister's place. And as Jacob rages, Laban claims that according to the law of the land, it's not my fault. I can't help it. A father must marry off his older daughter first. Don't blame me for the law. But he says to Jacob, I'll make you a deal. For another 7 years, you then can take Rachel as your wife if you are willing to work for that length of time again. So again, Laban and his people enjoy 7 more years of rich harvests and expanding flocks, all thanks to Jacob's superior abilities. But while the unloved Leah bears Jacob many children, Rachel, who he has taken as his wife now, his one and only love, remains barren for many years until Joseph finally sees the light of day. And we know what happens to the story of Joseph. After his second period of indenture is over, Jacob strikes another deal with Laban, whereby he is allowed to assemble his own herd. His prosperity soon sparks the envy of Laban's sons, Morash and Beor. Remember the guys that were kind of disgruntled because he never came with the dowry? Who accused Jacob of actually deceiving them and of stealing their property. So they're jealous, and they are trying to not make themselves look as bad as they do compared to Jacob. So Jacob wisely decides, it's time for me to move back to Canaan. And so he heads out with his wives and his children and the servants. And as soon as Laban hears about them leaving, he rounds up his sons and his men, and he gives chase because he doesn't want to lose this industrious son-in-law and all the prosperity he brings. So he finally meets up with Jacob on Mount Gilead. You see, I told you this is like a long-term movie, right? It could be like a trilogy or something. It just keeps going. But before he can reach Jacob, God appears to Laban and warns him not to harm Jacob or his people. So Jacob's most grueling ordeal, however, still awaits him. Can you imagine? So 14 years of indentured servitude to pay off his father-in-law for his wives. He's under threat of death by his brother, who he outwitted for the birthright. And he has brothers-in-laws that hate him. He may be prosperous in terms of his wealth, but there are lots of things that keep Jacob on the run. And so fearing about going back, he is so concerned about the fact that he wants to go back to Canaan and to his home, but if he does, he has to confront his brother Esau. And he knows that Esau still intends to kill him. So again, Jacob the wise man, he sends messengers with gifts to his brother to announce that he's coming, kind of trying to smooth things over a bit. And the messenger returns sooner than expected and reports that Esau is already on his way to meet him with 400 armed men. So what about winter is coming? 400 men are coming to get Jacob. And Jacob sets up camp on the banks of the river Jabbok. And that night, while his people await Esau with fear and trembling, and this is the part that was shared to us by Heather this morning, Jacob withdraws to collect himself on the other side of the river alone. And there he is attacked by a mysterious being whom he cannot actually identify. Is it man? Is it beast? Perhaps an angel, a messenger of God. And as the struggle intensifies and the angel realizes that he cannot subdue Jacob, do you remember Jacob is he's a determined fella. He strikes him fiercely on the hip, but Jacob, who gradually realizes who his adversary is, continues to grapple with him. And this is the part I love about this story. He refuses to relinquish his hold until the angel has blessed him. Isn't that an interesting contrast? At the beginning of the story, he outwitted his brother to get his father's blessing, kind of in an underhanded way. And it's almost like now he's determined to get an authentic blessing. Ultimately, the angel yields and gives Jacob the blessing together with the new name Israel. And he thus confirms Jacob's right to the blessing which he originally obtained by deceit. And the following morning, as Esau's army approaches, Jacob gathers his people behind him and awaits for his brother. And as Esau arrives at the head of his troops, Jacob humbly throws himself at his brother's feet. Esau breaks the tension by coming towards Jacob with open arms and welcoming him home. Reconciling their past differences, Jacob and Esau embrace. Isn't that a great story? Can't you just see it in a movie form? I'm sure it's been made. I just haven't watched it, but it's so filled with so many different parts. And I think that Jacob himself is such a fascinating and complex character. A man who grew up feeling favored, yet ultimately spent most of his time on the run or working to meet other people's demands and expectations. And it seems to me that the ultimate turning point in his life was the encounter described to us today by Heather, in our reading from Genesis. Jacob finally stops running, literally, and faces his greatest fear, death by his brother. You could argue he'd been trying to avoid this confrontation since he first finagled the birthright from his brother at their father's deathbed. Brene Brown might see this as his rumbling, which she describes as moving from our first responses to a deeper understanding of our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that leads to key learnings about who we are. Remember last week I talked about the reckoning, where we understand the events that brought us to where we are now and how we need to understand where we are in order to move forward? Well, Jacob has had his reckoning, and now he's rumbling. He's wrestling. He's coming to terms with the answers to some key questions that Brene Brown says are necessary for us to live our lives fully and authentically. And these are her 3 key questions. 1, what more do I need to learn and understand about the situation? Number 2, what more do I need to learn and understand about other people in this story? And number 3, what more do I need to learn and understand about myself? So you can imagine that when Jacob finally stops on that other side of the river where he sent the rest of his family and his herds and all his wealth ahead, he's wrestling with all of the things that have happened in his life up until this point. He knows he's going to be confronting Esau the next day and everything that he's done in his life up until this point. And he's starting to sort of get that broader picture of everything that's happened to bring him to this particular place and time. And he's wrestling with what that means for him and his future. He's learning about the other characters in all of those events. And more importantly, he's learning about himself. Ultimately, Jacob has his name changed from Jacob to Israel. He receives God's blessing and goes on to live the life he was born to live. He now understands who he is, why he did the things he did, and after the rumbling and after the night of wrestling with the angel, he greets his estranged brother with humility and regret. And he is met not by anger and revenge or even death, but by grace, love, and open arms. Instead of death, he is greeted with a new life. Some religious teachers or thinkers would refer to this as Jacob's dark night of the soul, that ultimate wrestling with the truths of our lives and our reckoning, which helps us to gain better understanding of who we are and why we're where we are and what we need to do to change or to move forward. The most poignant part of this story, I believe, is the fact that Jacob, despite the struggle and despite the weariness of wrestling all night long, and despite his own fears and fatigue of being on the run for most of his life, he is finally returning home to face his fears. And rather than realizing the worst-case scenarios that had been playing throughout his mind along the journey, he is in fact welcomed and embraced. When we are wrestling with our greatest fears, we must ask ourselves what we need to learn and understand why we're feeling the way we're feeling. And what do we need to learn or know about the other people in this situation? And what more can we possibly learn ourselves that might impact how we're living our lives today? As you know, my son is an aspiring professional golfer, so all season long, I think he's up to tournament number 30 or something that he's been playing in since February. And each time he heads out, starts on that first tee, and he has great hopes and expectations of doing well. And, the birdies come, maybe an eagle comes, but inevitably a double bogey, and the wheels fall off, and he's disappointed with not achieving what he had hoped to achieve when he first started out. And I think that's such an interesting metaphor for our lives as well, that we are continuing to try and make efforts, but things set us back and things don't always turn out the way we hope or wish, despite our best efforts. And I keep saying to Jake, it's not about winning or failing at this point. It's about the learning. Each time you walk off that golf course, what have you learned that going into the next round you can move forward with? And I think that Brene Brown writes that having the courage to reckon with our emotions and to rumble with our stories is the path to writing our brave new endings and the path that leads to wholeheartedness. It's also the beginning, understanding our fall and our rise, our owning of our story, taking responsibility. That is where the revolution starts. And that's the subject of next week's sermon, so you'll have to hang on and hear more about that next week. But Jacob reminds us that the reckoning and the rumbling are what leads us to those new beginnings and that revolution that sets our lives in a new direction of blessing. So God is with us on this journey. Do you notice any time that Jacob stopped, there was always some interaction or encounter with God, whether spirit, messenger, angel, and it helps to redirect him on his journey? We are never alone. God is ready and waiting to bless us, even in our hardest and darkest struggles and nights. And there is light of a new day ready to dawn. So, my friends, are you ready to rumble?